I would like to now request and hand over to Shri Kapoor for the proceedings of this session. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the beginning of the conference was having the blessing of the Honorable Minister of Railways, who talked about seamless operation through electrification after the uni-gauge project. Throughout the day, various options have been suggested by participants, discussed about decarbonization of Indian Railways, that is mission electrification. Yesterday we launched the mission electrification and mission decarbonization of Indian Railways, again an initiative of the Honorable Minister for Railways. We have also signed an agreement with Ministry of Science and Technology for coordination on technological developments and harnessing of renewable energy. The objective is to make railways greener by adding another 24,000 kilometers of electrification of rail tracks to existing 28,000 to reduce the carbon footprints, which will take to 90% of electrification of BG tracks. To achieve these ambitious targets, there is a need to look forward to latest trends in financing mechanism and accelerating pace of electrification and decarbonization. The initiatives already taken by railways are modernization and improvement of organizational efficiency, EPC mode of contract for RE projects, delegation of more powers to zonal railways, and mechanization of execution. Coming to the other front, that is harnessing of renewable energy and IR, Indian Railways target to harness 1 gigawatt of solar and 200 megawatt wind power as announced in Rail Budget 15-16, 500 megawatt of solar units on rooftops through central finance assistance from MNRE, and balance 500 megawatt on land. 14 megawatt of solar energy already commissioned and works in progress for 50 megawatt power solar rooftop zonal by zonal railways and production units. Tenders already invited for 100 megawatt of solar plants on rooftops of railway building by REMCL. SCCI, Reva Ultra Mega Solar, Madhya Pradesh, also roped in for using renewable energy for traction and non-traction purposes. Another 300 megawatt potential explored by CEL. 36.5 megawatt of wind power capacity already installed, and work awarded for 56 megawatt in the state of Maharashtra, AP, Tamil Nadu, and MP for non-traction purpose. Another 100 megawatt windmills will be taken through MNRE. Besides these, more options are being explored to achieve the intended goals of decarbonization and electrification. Now I look forward to views of our esteemed panelists on the subject. Thank you. Anybody can express the views. We start with Mr. Mehrotra.
Thank you, sir. When we are in a mission mode with a very specified timeline and capacity in mind, the financing cannot remain a business as usual, and we need to really explore every possible opportunity to make it happen faster. I believe the proposition can be put into three categories. The requirement. One is on the track electrification, for which already the works have been awarded, and associated infrastructure means TSS and other facilities. Dedicated transmission lines, because we have seen difficulties created in certain quarters on the open access to railways, and if the biggest customer in the country cannot get open access, then there is a lot to rethink on the whole policy framework for open access. Investments in renewable energy. So I'll give a few suggestions on each one of this, and then maybe expect views from other panelists on this, as well as their views on what they think way forward. So besides the normal capex which the railways would be allocating for the projects already in hand, I believe that the traction work as such is not a separable project unit as such. It's not like an IPP, which can be set as a separate project entity and can attract investors on risk return basis. Therefore, any OHE related investment, if required, is best suited for an annuity method or a method where we give the responsibility of design, build, finance and transfer. The operations cannot be segregated from railways operations. Then these operations of OHE and its maintenance should remain with the railways, but design, build, finance and transfer. Informally we have checked, there are people who are interested to put funds if such opportunities are opened up to market. So I believe that the OHE work can have an annuity method linked to DBFT project mode. The second is dedicated transmission lines. Since we have REMC working on this for last about 2 years, some projects are already out for investors' interest. For example, the Delhi-Mumbai 1200 kilometer tender is already out. The pre-bid is on 8th. Now, these projects can very well be structured on usage basis, because there is a method in the country to ascertain the usage charges for such investments, and I see no reason why such a logic would not be extended to a railway project of same nature. So transmission lines will have a ready method in place. Third is on the renewable. Not only the additional renewables through railways investments, there is a huge potential to get a long-term PPA for solar or windmill or maybe even hydro, because this is a fit case for a long-term user to go to a long-term renewable energy source, which is a hydro project. So besides, some investments have already been, as Mr. Kapoor said, 36 megawatts windmill and a couple of solar investments already done. Going forward, long-term PPP-based renewable power purchases have a ready solutions where railways finances will not be strained. Rather, savings because of long-term fixed rate commitments would significantly generate savings in the operations cost. So the immediate solution for renewable is to go for PPP-based windmill or solar projects. Just to share with the audience here, we are going to come out with 64 megawatts of windmill to be set up on this basis very soon in the states of Andhra, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Rajasthan. And some more are in the offing, 100 megawatts very soon you will see on this basis, where railways will be the long-term buyer. And because the buyer here is a sovereign client, so the advantage to you for borrowing funds from the market would be there. And we also see to receive that advantage in the bids to be received for these projects. Also, railways have done an interesting SPV called Railway Energy Management Company in JV with rights, where 51% is put by us, 49% with by railways. A project on a very aggressive financing, say leveraging, has already been made operational, windmill 26 megawatts in Jaisalmer. Now, I see a very strong potential for such SPVs to leverage their capability to raise money from the market, either bonds or bank funding or other institutional funding, or even long-term green funds from abroad. This is possible provided we have earmarked projects ready for posing before the lenders. Leveraging of such entities is a huge potential which I very strongly believe can be put in place soon. Now, in all these models, since railways are the buyers, I see that anybody who is looking for investment would be very comfortable with a sovereign buyer in place. So with this, I am very optimistic that there are different solutions available in the market for financing for the mission electrification, some of which I could think of, I have already shared. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mehrotra has raised some relevant points. Anybody to react? Bharat.
So, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be here on the panel. I would like to draw your attention on 3 points, but before that, I think for a long time, there was this myth of shortage of funds, availability of funds. So, with the kind of momentum that has been generated now with the Honorable Railway Minister, I think that myth is more or less behind us now, and therefore financing in that sense is not really a bottleneck as I see it today. The challenge, however, remains of being able to electrify 5,000 to 6,000 kilometers of track per year. I think that's a very daunting task, not just in terms of being able to implement from the supplier side, I mean, the contractor side, but also the internal ability of the organization to be able to manage projects of this size and scale. And the question that begs an answer is the current procurement practice that currently exists in the railways, is that the best way to move forward? For example, and it's a question that I'd like to pose, is the core model the best way to manage that procurement, to lead that procurement of 6,000 kilometers per year? To my mind, considering some of the recent technologies that exist today, we need to give to the contractors and invite technology, new technology, invite contractors to come up with their solutions which allow them a certain positive, I would say a positive upside in case they are able to finish the project ahead of schedule, number one, but also penalize them for not being able to deliver beyond the target date. And the way to do that is through, there are several contracting strategies which are currently available, but all that requires, there's some problem. Go back to the old technology. So, going back, I mean, we need to move away from core, number one, as I see it. Number two, we need to also move away from even a BOQ type, the type of contracting. Need to move towards an EPC type of a turnkey type of an approach, where we reward contractors for finishing projects before, and we penalize them for not being able to finish projects. I think this is a very important point. For me, procurement practices need to change if we have to hit the target of 6,000 kilometers of electrification every year. The other possibility, of course, is the PPP approach, the public-private partnership approach, which somewhat becomes a little bit irrelevant in the sense of the fact that finances are available, but becomes quite relevant when you look at the life cycle cost. Because let us understand that one fundamental problem with cash contracts is that it puts the focus away from life cycle concept, life cycle cost concept. When you roll the life cycle cost concept into technology, it radically changes the delivery mechanism, the type of components and the type of technology that is used in implementing projects of this size and scale. And therefore, PPP becomes important and relevant. A back of the envelope calculation seems to suggest that when you electrify a section, let's say a section of 300 kilometers or 400 kilometers, the payback period in the best of times could be as less as 3 years, or in the worst of times maybe as much as 5 to 7 years. Now that does become a very compelling proposition from the concessionaire's perspective. And even if you factor in all the risks that are likely to come in, it does become a compelling proposition, provided the traffic risk or the commercial risk is not put on the contractor. Because very often, may end up in a situation where the traffic risk is attempted to be put on the concessionaire, and then there are alternative routes available. The traffic doesn't materialize, and in the end, it's not a workable model. So, in the end, from the railways perspective, what you need is power at the panto, and payment could be either in terms of availability or in terms of the payment linked to the uptime for the entire section. And that could be the basis of payment. Little more reformed than the annuity approach, because annuity means that you straight away just work out the annuity, but in this case you also link it to availability, you link it to the quality of power at the panto. So power at panto is a good concept, I think, that we need to look at. A third element which I would like to focus on is the rolling stock. So if we are looking at 5,000 to 6,000 kilometers of electrification every year, and we take the thumb rule of, for every 7 kilometers you need an additional locomotive, that means we would need something like 700 locomotives every year. And even if we look at the current production of CLW and we upgrade it, say 350 locomotives, electric locomotives, add another 100 locomotives from Alstom, which are likely to come from 2019-20 onwards, we still have a shortfall on the rolling stock. So a question that needs to be looked at in more detail is how would we augment our rolling stock and more so the electric locomotive production in the country, and what would be the models that would be adopted for that purpose. And in the end, I think whether we talk in terms of the overall cost impact or the cost benefit analysis of electrification, we factor in the saving in the carbon footprint, that you look at all these elements, and it's a clear case that we can build strong financing models around these two approaches. One could be an EPC turnkey type of contract where we have where we make the payment based on the timely delivery, number one, or a concession where we are able to take a life cycle type of approach, life cycle costing type of approach, and move forward very quickly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bharat. I'll request Mr. Jyoti, man from L&T, who understands both sides of the table very well, to react to it.
Thank you. I think Bharat has mentioned concerns of the industry, so I will essentially further that. In L&T, we are today executing about 4.5 track kilometers of electrification, over 5,500 crores. Now, these are pretty large figures, and I think when I look at the figures of what Railways is planning, I think the opportunities are huge. So the question is, how do we address this? The first issue on the subject is financing, and I think Rajiv mentioned this, Mr. Mehrotra mentioned this. But from an L&T perspective, and L&T has got a pretty deep balance sheet, I can only say in the current day and time, the PPP approaches, you can call it DBFT approach or DBOT approach. I think today, the current context, the PPP models and participation from the private sector appears to be very, very limited. At least from the L&T side, I can say that. Balance sheets are pretty stretched, pretty stressed. People have made a lot of investments in concession agreements which have still stuck. And therefore, today people are trying to stretch out, they reduce their assets and so on. So in this current context, if you're looking at financing coming in from public-private partnership, I see at least companies like L&T would not potentially participate in these areas. However, having said that, I think railways have today a significant access to large funding. LIC funding is part of it. So I think the question which I agree with Bharat is that today you have a funding. The issue is how do you use the funding, and since your objective is electrification, then the question is how do you actually tender, how do you actually execute. So these are the issues which are important issues. When I look at electrification, I think despite I'm not touching about the 3 MOUs which have been signed today, I think the principal organization has been CORE, and CORE has been tendering essentially based on an schedule of rate model, SOR model, where there are significant free issues which the government gives, which CORE gives to the contractors, and this significant number means that it could go up to 50 to 60% of the contract value are free issues. I'm talking about contract values where they give you free issue of conductors, free issue of transformers, free issue of booster transformers, and apart from this, even the plant and machinery are also being lent out by the railways to the contractors. Now all this puts the project into multiple interfaces and therefore makes it extremely impossible to target a timeline. I think the important element is, if you look at the kind of timelines, these timelines have been extended because of multiple interfaces, which results in two things. One is you are not exciting larger contractors because you are reducing the size of the project for the contractor. As I mentioned to you, 50 to 60% are free issues. So this does not excite large contractors. It does not also encourage large contractors to use mechanization, which is extremely critical in this area. So I think this is an area which you need to think and ponder very, very seriously. The core model, therefore, needs to be readdressed. This paradigm needs to be shifted very significantly. From an L&T experience, I just mentioned that we have got orders of about 4,300 track kilometers. All these are not on core model. These are on an EPC model. These are on a design build model. And I think if we were to extend this by simply replicating a DFC concept, which is a design build concept, which is an EPC concept, I think you are actually potentially increasing the capacity to execute much faster, much bigger projects. Just for the benefit of the people, I can say that a typical DFC model, EPC model which we are executing is perhaps 10 times the size being executed in the same timeline, where we have no dependence on anybody. I'm even discounting the fact that DFC is a greenfield project and therefore you may not need interfaces, but that brings out the second subject, which is also equally critical, that when you have an EPC model, it must be governed by very clearly terms of conditions which are international, which are, I could say, FIDIC conditions, which places the risks at the right stakeholder. The risks must rest with the right place. In the core model, and which I can also say also is a part of IRGCC terms and conditions, the risks are not placed in the right area, and therefore the risks of getting a block in time, getting the machinery in time, and the interfaces and all, therefore, all lead the risks on the contractor, not on the other stakeholder. The minute you move to a EPC model which is governed by FIDIC conditions, I think you are perforce challenging, pushing and pulling each other on a win-win situation, which therefore could result in much bigger players showing interest, also using mechanization to speed up alternatives, and also trying to do, I'm not even saying optimization, but also trying to take the responsibility of designing and shaping the electrification, which is so critical here. We are very conscious, when you're doing an EPC contract, we are very conscious that the RDSO conditions, the railway protocols have to be met very clearly. And therefore, when you design, when you're doing an EPC concept, while the railway protocols can be very clearly kept in mind, the constraints which interface or interface each other, which are irrelevant, must be taken away. And therefore, you will motivate the larger players to work. And I think this is something which needs to be thought of very seriously. You have next door in DFC where these projects are being done in this manner. And I think core must relook at this. I'm aware that they are relooking at an EPC concept within core, but I think that concept must be looked at beyond the GCC conditions and must look at a FIDIC model which balances the risks and costs. So I think if these changes are done, I do not anticipate constraints from the supply side. And I think when I say supply, you have capacities for contractors. Despite having a pretty significant $1 billion order backlog in hand for electrification, L&T still has significant capacity to undertake more such projects, provided the projects are clear, provided the projects are timeline based, provided the risks and responsibilities are lying very clearly at multiple stakeholders. So I think the supply condition, whether it's steel structures, there is no constraints on steel structures. Today we are buying significant amount, and there are a large number of steel structure manufacturers in the country who have adequate capacity, despite having an RDSO approval. So you could have certain limited constraints for conductors, where railway must rethink how do we broad base certain areas of conductors and catenary wires where there are only few manufacturers. Do we look at importation? In DFC, we have a natural advantage that we are importing the conductors and catenary as part of the mandate from Japan, and therefore the local constraints which could come in, both in terms of quality and quantity, do not figure in here. So I only see very limited constraints which needs to be broken, but in terms of capacity, execution capacity, in terms of capacity for structures and so on, I see no constraints in that. And therefore, when you're looking at 4,000 to 5,000 kilometers per year, it's a tall task, but I think it's a task which can be achieved. I think with this, maybe we'll take the second round of questions.
Thank you, Rajiv. I want Deepak Sablok from IRCON to react to it. You have a mic? It works?
Thank you, sir. Hello. I'll take further what Mr. Jyoti has said. Hello. I'll take it further that there is an ambitious target of 5,000 kilometers electrification to be done, and in next 5 years about 25,000 kilometers. There is a need to look at the entire execution methodology. See, when we are executing in India, we are not looking at the mechanization to that an extent as we are doing. We are doing a project in South Africa. We have completed a project in Malaysia where complete mechanization is there. When I say that, then the wiring trains, then the rail cum road vehicles, then even the excavation or taking the masts, erections, everything. So much so that even cement, sand and aggregates, they are mixed into the bags by weight proportions and kept in the bags ready for each foundation. Only the water is added and they are slipped into the foundation wherever RMC is not available. But here, what is happening when we are taking out all the materials out, for example, typically a 300 kilometers project, say about 300 crores, the package size comes to about 50 to 60 crores, in which if we need one set of machinery which costs about 25 crores, it can't be charged to one project. But no contractor is ready to bring so much of machinery, and we can't stipulate because then somewhere in the L1 and the cost, it comes into play. So I suggest that either we have a bank with one of the PSUs or with the railways of all the machinery which is required mandatorily to be used for a speediest execution of the project, that has a quality, that has a time, and that is cost effective, because all the money is borrowed as CMD Rights is told that we get the money, how we arrange the funds. So if we are able to complete a 5-year projects in 3 years, or vis-a-vis that we are able to save a lot of money because that project will get commissioned faster. On the contractor side, I suggest that we should look at what are the minimum machineries which are required, package size to be enhanced, and also our estimates are pretty old. They are so much old that by the time the tenders are called, even on EPC by the railways, then the tender committees are not able to finalize because the cost with the estimate and what has been the market driven forces, the cost is much more than that. So I suggest we have to have a clear picture of what the work is, and in today's latest LARs or latest cost or the even analysis of rates are done with the maximum mechanization. You will be surprised to know we did a project of third line where we are getting on an average 15 minutes block. And in that 15 minutes, you can imagine that you go to the site and you lower the OHE, and what you do in that 15 minutes. Choice was to take it or leave it. So it took us 7 years to complete that project. It's the third line project. So here there is a need to look into both the sides, that how much commitment is there in terms of blocks, in terms of approvals of the estimates or drawings or designs from both the sides. And that's how we'll be able to achieve such a target, by having a re-look at the entire processes on both the sides. Other than electrification, I suggest that we have recently done a project in Raebareli, and I'll compare it because I was associated with Kapurthala as well. Even during the daytime, we had to have a cluster of 24 tube lights of 12 watt each at an interval of about 15 feet. Whereas with the piped light concept in Raebareli, we are not supposed to have any lighting in most of these sheds during the daytime. So that is energy saved. And also turbojets are provided, and therefore the fans are not to be put on about 8 months a year, because the turbos, they are without any electricity, are able to change the entire air in the sheds. There are other small things like green features, green building concept. With today's presentation, few of the speakers have brought out that in case we design our buildings, in our office of IRCON, when my GM Electrical told me that we will be able to save about 10% if we change all the lights, it was a hard decision, but we changed all of them with the LEDs. In Raebareli, or MCF coach factory in Raebareli, we have gone for induction lights in all the factories for the night time, night shift working. And in all the colonies, we have gone for LEDs. So this also, if we can take as a challenge to replace all the lights in the entire Indian railway system, whether it is our colonies, street lights or offices, then we save a lot on that, and every energy saved is that will have a lot of bearing, and we'll be able to adhere to the commitments given by the government I'll also mention that all new projects during this rail shiver, we are looking at that in next 5 years, we are wanting to enhance railways by 3x. And 15,000 to 17,000 additional track is going to be added. That also electrification will be over and above the targets which we have discussed today morning of 25,000 kilometers. So I suggest that all new projects which are coming up, they should be with the electrification. And a greenfield projects, electrification is much faster, much easier along with the rest of the construction. I think these are the points I would like to cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. I request gentleman from PGCI again to air his views also.
Good evening, I am Paritosh, representing a subsidiary of India Infrastructure Finance. I will just rephrase the discussions that we have from a lender's perspective. What is lender looking for when is lending to a project? There are two main conditions that a lender is looking for. One is an institutional mechanism. Now, institutional mechanism means they need to be identifiable borrower who's going to take a money. That could be an institution like IRFC, which is a financing institution borrowing and then lending it to the railway projects. It could be something like DFCC, which is doing a specific project. It could be an energy company which is developing the solar powers and all. Second is looking for an identifiable revenue source that is going to come on that. In the case of dedicated freight corridor, it could be a track access charges that is going to come to DFC, and from where they are going to do the payments. In case of solar power plant, it is a PPA that we have with the railways for 20, 25 year, 30 year, from which the repayment will come. For track electrification and all, there is no per se identifiable revenue that is going to come. So maybe on the lines of track access charges, a mechanism can be created that there's an institution which is going to do that electrification. Annuity or other identifiable revenue source can be given to that institution for them to borrow. That is what the lenders are looking. Either we put it in a project form, or we need to have a mechanism like IRFC where we go for another infrastructure financial vehicles like infrastructure debt fund, or a mechanism like AIF, alternate investment funds, or attracting the sovereign funds into that mechanism. I will divide the lending now, if I look at the project specific, into two categories. One asset is a project specific where we have an identifiable project. Second is the balance sheet funding. Now for the balance sheet funding, I mean something like an NTPC which is doing a power projects and all, have a strong balance sheet. So they can go to the corporate bond markets. Green bonds is also a format of that, where you're offering a balance sheet to an investor to raise the fund based on the rating of that balance sheet. So there the investor is not looking for an individual project and the revenue that is coming from that project, but the balance sheet that he's looking out there on which he's lending out there. Say for the solar plants, if I just take an example, today if railway put an SPV of their own and put in say 10,000, 20,000 crore as an equity into that, similarly like in DFC where we have put in 20,000 crore and they have done a project for 80,000 crore by raising from the multilaterals, you can do similar out here. You can leverage that 3 times, 4 times, do the solar plants within 2 years, 3 years, because today the solar plant can be up and running in 12 to 15 months. Payback periods are smaller out there. Then you can go for asset recycling. From asset recycling, I mean you have a project which is now completed. So it's not a project, it's an asset. There are pension funds who are looking to get into that. They're ready to give 20, 25 year money. NHA is looking to monetize the road assets, the completed road from where the toll is coming. So a pension fund comes along with a private player which takes up the O&M, and the pension fund gives the money. You recycle, you get your money back, which you can put it to the other form. Why I'm suggesting this? We all know that the public sector in India can raise money 2 to 3% cheaper than where the private sector can borrow. 2 to 3% on a 10% means about 20 to 30% of saving. That means a 5 rupee tariff becomes like a 4 rupee tariff. That is how the asset recycling can be done, money can be recycled, and you have a lesser cost out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'll request Mr. Cilliers to put up his point of view. We have a lot to do with UNDP.
Thank you, Shri Kapoor, and thank you also actually to everybody for this invitation. It's very nice for UNDP to be here. I think it's incredibly encouraging to see the wonderful efforts being done by the Indian Railways also to not only promote electricity use, but also to use the electricity in a clean way, and to also to look at some of the challenges being put up for decarbonization and how to promote that. Maybe I'll just do a quick observation from where I'm sitting. I'm sitting from outside looking in, and as you saw, we also are working already for a long time with the railways. We've been having a long partnership with various sections of the railways in various states. But just to maybe mention that I think the opportunities that the discussions here today provide is just enormous, I think, and it's wonderful to see how railways is taking this forward and the initiatives that are being taken. Maybe just to say that what I maybe want to focus on just in this discussion is also how to do it in pace and to really move it forward to accelerate those opportunities. And I think maybe I want to say a couple of things around that. The first is really that I think what we see, electricity and also how to do it in a clean way, whether it's with solar or any other types of energy forms, it's not an either-or question. I think that's the important one that we saw here today. It's not either just getting things electrified or doing it in a clean way and building solar plants or creating solar somewhere else. It really needs to be done and with, it needs to be done together. So it's and with together needs to be thought through, and that's really as the electrification process gets underway, to think about how to do it with clean energy, specifically solar or other energies, is really a huge advantage. And secondly, to say it makes not only business sense because the electricity being provided through that way is really becoming cheaper. It also makes sense for the people that you're serving because again, it's providing them with clean energy and a way that they can also save. Thirdly, and I think more importantly, the planet and the environment that India really cares about. And I think this combination is really wonderful to see at a conference like this and how it is being promoted and thought through. The third thing actually with launching big projects such as this, I think that, we typically say that they are in development initiatives, and this for me is a development initiative. There's really six C's that need to be considered. The first is to create a good project and to create good initiatives. The second is really that the capacities has to be in place. And I think the biggest challenge, and I also work for, unfortunately, a very large bureaucracy, is that the capacities needs to be the right capacities. We have, in a bureaucracy like ours as well in the UN system, I always say we have three types of people. Those that says, always says, not now, not the right time, we can't do it, we don't have the money, we don't have the people, we can't do it. Then secondly, you have people who says, yes, it can be done, but, and then they give you a whole list of reasons why it shouldn't be done, but, and they keep on going. And then thirdly, you get people, those that are really motivated, who says, why not? Why not do it? It makes sense for the country, it makes sense for the economy, it makes sense for our business, it makes sense for the planet. And I think those are the types of capacities that you need. People to take risks. It's a little uncomfortable for us, because you're talking about finance institutions, you're talking about business, you're talking about, maybe technology, you're talking about people that we're not always comfortable bringing into maybe the railways or the development project, but it has to be done because that is really where the future is. The third C is how to really then construct, make sure the projects work in a real, coherent way and that it's constructed well. Fourthly, you need to have the capital, obviously that's important, and to talk to the finance institutions. Again, people are coming there, yes, because it makes financial and business sense to them, but they also want to invest in something that is good for India and good for the planet, and I think finding that balance is important. The fifth C is really how to connect, and with connect I mean two things. One is digitally. We launched an app this morning, and the more people are connected, that's the purpose of these types of apps, the more they are both doing it in a transparent way. You minimize corruption because people know what's happening and how things are being undertaken. Secondly, you also create good examples where people can learn from each other. The minister said, let's get those best stations and identify them and give them prizes. But I think there's also incentive for that. You already have wonderful examples of how solar power is being rolled out throughout the the railways in different way. The challenge is to connect these good examples. I always use the joke because it fits into with electricity. It's one thing to have good sparks, and I think you have good sparks all over. There's good examples, whether it's in Gujarat and Rajasthan and other places with wonderful examples. But if you connect them If you connect the sparks, it becomes electricity. And you need to have an example where lots of good examples are connected, and I think that's the exciting part. And then lastly, obviously, you need to channel it, and I think that's where the market access comes in. How do you channel this in a financial way that it can also be scaled up? And that's why we're thinking together with also the electricity division and other areas about doing it at scale, because once it's channeled at scale, it starts to make a difference really in terms of the development impact. So again, from my side, it's just to say congratulations to the railways. It's wonderful to see these opportunities and initiatives and discussions, because it creates hope not only for India but also, I think, for saving a lot of the challenges that we face in the development world. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We have always been taking a lot of help from UNDP, and we continue to do it. Now I request Mr. Shahzad Alam, our Financial Commissioner, to give his views.
Good evening, everybody. What the theme which comes out is that we have the resources now and we can go whole hog and get things done. I entirely agree that now we have the resources, but I have a word of caution there. We also need to synergize the efforts being made by everyone. If PGCIL already has a network, why should we create a duplicate network? If a transmission line is available, it needs only probably connectivity to our TSS. So maybe a little bit of effort there in ensuring that we don't duplicate effort and duplicate the infrastructure for setting up. The grid is available, we can make full use of it. The other issue which I feel is that while the capital cost we have the resources and we can go ahead for it, simultaneously we also have to see that the present revenue state, the railways available working expenses being limited, we have to ensure that it does not add to any burden on the efforts which are being made now by the electrical department, not only in the railways but everywhere, changing over to LED and improving on, cutting on costs, bringing down the cost is an effort which needs to be further worked on and bring about an effective economy in our efforts. I was talking to Bharat just now, and they have a concept of a hybrid loco. I mean, and I believe it would be available everywhere. If right now we don't have, we have limited, we need much more to electrify our lines. Till such time, why can't we go in for these hybrid locos if they are available, so that in areas where there is no electrification, we can continue a seamless operation with these locos. This could be an area which also can be worked on. On the solar panels and other means of electricity, I feel that there are people who are experienced and who are doing this job. We only need to use them and allow them to build, operate and lease, and we just take it from them. We don't have to develop ourselves. There are specialists in the field, let them do the job, we only buy it from them and use it for us. I feel that would be better than setting up our own infrastructure for the other means of electrification. This effort which has taken today, I'm sure Mr. Kapoor and his team have set up this in this international conference, which will bring about even further improvements in our working, and will also enable, with the MOU signed today, increase the speed of the electrification in the country. And maybe we can, I believe 6,000 kilometers still to be done. If I believe these days machines are available which can do it at 3 kilometers per day, per machine per day. I think if a little bit of planning is done, we can achieve our targets much more well in advance. I thank Mr. Kapoor for inviting me, and being part of this seminar, and I wish further success. Thank you.
You have to be part of everything, nothing moves without you. To sum up the discussions of the panelists, the presentations in the day, one thing is very clear, that we have to increase the pace by using mechanization. As the panelists have mentioned, and already the thought has been embedded in the minds of everybody, including core, that henceforth they have to go in for EPCs. The normal tendering and all those may not take us far off. So that thing is well taken care of, and the experience of DFC will be seen, as mentioned by Mr. Shehzad and others. There is no duplication of any transmission line we are going to do. The whole effort is to connect to the ISTS, that is Interstate Transmission System owned by PGCIL, so that we are not dependent upon the states to wheel and tap energy even from any other source, because they have their own tantrums. So the direction is that, and we are working on that only through the REMCL rights. We are already working on those projects. And as far as the non-renewable energy sources are concerned, UNDP has always been a great help, and the direction is there for solar, windmill, LEDs, and the effort is to go in for ESCO model or in collaboration with EESL, so that the outgo of the finances are least, and we have a PPP partner who do the investment and give us the results. So to sum up, I think it has been a very good day of interaction, and we had very good understanding of the subject. A fresh discussion also has been very lively. I thank the panelists. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kapoor, and thank you to all the panelists for sharing their very constructive views on the way forward. We further express our gratitude and appreciation to them, and would like to request Mr. Kapoor to kindly present the mementos.
Any questions from the audience, please? We can make it fast because
Okay.
time is limited.
Yeah, just pass it. Mics to the audience. Achha, they're all here.
Mr. Chairman, it's a very interesting seminar to hear the panelists. I have one or two sessions not fully in line with what the panelists discussions. One, that since it's a mission area for Indian Railways to go for 200 kmph, I suggest the railway electrification look into making some schemes on the new RE suitable for 200 kmph. For example, Delhi, Ahmedabad. If still some gaps are left for ordering, we should consider similarly in Bombay, Chennai or Guwahati region. Because future we have to take a policy decision. Since most of the lines are likely to be more passenger oriented, we should make it for 200 kmph. The second point, I think brought by Mr. Jyoti also, that there is bound to be constraints on materials. So we should go ahead for import, create a material bank, and that should not be a risk for the partner. But the suggestion he gave that we could modify the contract to suit the risk, I think it is well taken. The third point would be whether we should go for collaboration bilateral with Germany and maybe with France, with whom we had a very successful collaboration for this 200 kmph. And then we can try different, they will do financing, we could have long-term loans, and we can ease the burden also, apart from masala bonds, various bonds we are discussing. So this is one area we could have some bilateral cooperation which is give more leverage. This should be also considered, this is my view. Thank you.
I just want to make one point. When we are doing the entire planning for electrification, we have already seen the issues which have happened where for distances like 400 kilometers, you had diesel running below the wire. Now when you are planning it, I think it was mentioned in the morning session that somewhere we have to have a corridor approach planning. In the sense that we should not be in a situation where we have invested all that money. We think that yes, we are getting a rate of return in that money which we have invested in rail electrification, but we should plan it in such a way that we make best and full use of electrification.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sukhbir Singh. I have 3 points to make. One on the RE, which Mr. Kapoor has already said. In fact, I am of very firm conviction that the present system of core is absolutely not working. Procurement of the material like contact wire, catenary wire makes no sense. You must go for the EPC and call a big contract so that a lot of people are able to participate. This effort was initiated somewhere in 2009, but unfortunately it has not seen the light of the day. And the time has come, we have to change our approach and do it as fast as we can. The second point, which is very relevant, which Mr. Venkatesan has made, which I again emphasize, whatever future OHEs you are making, please make it fit for 200 kilometers, and tomorrow, day after, you are going to have a RO system on the Indian Railways. So we have to look at that we plan a OHE in such a system that this system can be employed in the Indian Railways without further delay. Today the constraint is only the FOVs. One day or the other, this FOV constraint has to go, and Indian Railway has no option other than following this system. The third on the green energy. The green energy is a very big subject. It is not limited to the only solar or maybe the LEDs or waste management. Indian Railway has a tremendous scope for implementation of the green energy, because we have large number of goods shed vacant, which are getting unauthorizedly occupied by the people. If you can develop them into the solar bank or somewhere where the wind is solar plus wind back, perhaps you will save the land and you will generate lot of energy which will meet the requirement of Indian Railways, as well as you will be able to feed the grid. Now for the example, Kanpur. Kanpur has such a huge goods shed which is lying unutilized, and a lot of land has already been occupied. Similar situation exists, I think, many stations in Indian Railways. So Indian Railways has to draw a line, and this is a time that we must try to take advantage of it, get land vacated and use it for the solar energy. Other is that now the technology is available. Initially, I think we didn't have the good technology where solar and wind can be combined. But now technologies are available, and somebody is already manufacturing in India, I think in Hyderabad, with the collaboration from the USA, where the wind and the solar have been combined, and that wind turbine can operate at very low speed, which is not only useful into the wind zone, but it is also very useful into the areas which do not have wind zone. The another which is very, very important area where unfortunately we are not touched the air conditioning. Air conditioning was considered as a luxury, but today is a necessity, and they are a big jugglers of the energy. Now the systems are available where you can straightway save almost about 30 to 35% of the power on the energy, with a better efficiency on the system. So this is one area, virgin area, perhaps we have to look into that or implement it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We can close the session. Thank you.
Thank you once again. May I request Mr. Kapoor to please do the honors of presenting the mementos to our speakers. Go that way. Thanking Shri Rajiv Mehrotra. We'll go this order anyway. Thanking Shri Shahzad Shahji. Thanking Shri Deepak Sablok. Okay, sorry. Thanks to Shri Rajiv Jyoti. Thanking Mr. Paritosh Garga. Thanking Shri Bharat Salhotra. Appreciation now to Mr. Yakosilius. And may I request Shri Dayal Dogra to kindly present the memento, thanking the session moderator, session chair, presenting the memento to Shri Ashwani Kumar Kapoor. Thank you. Before we finally close the session also with a group photograph, we propose a formal vote of thanks for this conference, and I would like to request Shri Dogra, the Honorary General Secretary. So we'll do the vote of thanks and then we'll just close with a group photograph. IREE and CEENR to propose a vote of thanks.
Very good afternoon. Shri Ashwani Kapoor, Patron IREE, Member Traction, Railway Board and Moderator. Shri Gangaram Agarwal, President IREE and Additional Member Electrical Railway Board. Our distinguished panelists from India and abroad. Shri Shahjad Shah, Financial Commissioner Railway Board. I'll take this opportunity to congratulate him on elevation to FC Railway Board. Shri Rajiv Malhotra, CMD Rides. Shri Deepak Sablok, CMD IRCON. Shri Rajiv Jyoti, Head Railway Division L&T. Shri Bharat Salotra, MD Alstom. Shri Yaku Silia, Country Director UNDP. Mr. Garga from PGCIL. Retired senior officers from railways, PSU, from other railways, ladies and gentlemen. It was my proud privilege to propose a vote of thanks. Conference was inaugurated by Honorable Railway Minister Shri Suresh Prabhakar Prabhu and was graced by our Chairman Railway Board Shri K. Mital. I am thankful to them for sparing their valuable time, and they set the ball rolling for today's session. We had two technical sessions today. I am thankful to Chairman of the technical session, Shri N. Venkateshan and Shri Sudesh Kumar, former member Electrical Railway Board, for smoothly conducting the technical sessions. My special thanks to all speakers for sharing their experience through their technical presentation. The panel discussion on theme, latest and financial mechanism for accelerating pace of electrification and decarbonization of Indian Railways, moderated by Shri Ashwani Kapoor, Member Traction Railway Board. I am thankful to him for beautifully moderating the discussion in full flow within the time frame. I thank all the panelists for sharing their views and give their suggestion to achieve the goal of accelerating the pace of electrification and decarbonization. The views expressed by some of the panelists about the financial mechanism and modern technology, it has also left us a food for thought on the mechanization, relook at the existing model of tendering, and some of our vendors approved sources, and future OCHI at 200 kmph. Once again, I thank all the delegates for their overwhelming response. Somehow we were not able to even accommodate all of them. Speakers and sponsors for their active participation. At last, I again thank and congratulate my team of IREE. I also thank the officers from the Railway Board for their continuous support and guidance, and officers and staff from the Northern Railway who worked day and night to make this event a success. I also thank the management of La Meridian, our event manager, and also our comparer, Ms. Vimi. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. And we finally close the conference with a group photograph with all our panelists on the stage. Can I request our photographer? Yeah, please.
We had launched the mission electrification and decarbonization of railways yesterday. The Honorable Minister, the Ministers of Power from states of Bihar, Himachal Pradesh and other states were available. Then we had number of officers from the regulatory commissions, that is Punjab and Gujarat and so many other states. We had CM from Arunachal Pradesh, who happens to be Power Minister also. We had the ambassadors from UK, Korea, Spain, and representatives of the ambassador from Germany and France also. So the whole idea was to launch this mission electrification at a faster pace. Now the question is why the need has arisen. The need is because we have to decarbonize the railways and take the electrification to 90% of the BG tracks, which happens to be at 28,000 kilometers, that is 44%. By adding 24,000, we'll take it to 52,000. That is 90% of the tracks will be electrified. And by running trains on electric traction, which is much more energy efficient and sort of green energy, we will be able to save diesel. Already we have transferred 70 pairs of trains, that is 140 trains, from diesel to electric under the wire, which has given us a saving of 250 crores. By transferring 100 more trains from diesel to electric, we will be saving around 525 more crores, taking the total saving to around 800 crores. That is one target. Secondly, we want to do 1000 megawatt of solar provision, out of which 500 megawatt on rooftops, that is service buildings, platforms, offices, etc., or wherever vacant space is available, and 500 megawatt on the land use. That makes 1000 megawatt. 200 megawatt of wind energy we want to use. That's another green initiative. Plus we want to convert the existing stations to LED based stations. Out of that, out of 700 odd stations, we have done around 200 stations, and we are trying various models in this. We are trying ESCO models. We are in collaboration with EESL. Today, for electrification, for enhanced electrification, we have given the letter of intent to PGCIL, that is Power Grid Corporation India Limited, and to RITES and to IRCON, that is our PSUs, so that the electrification is done at a faster rate and we achieve our target by 2020.